Good evening, Brown community, and everyone else tuning in tonight from wherever in the world you may be. It is my enormous honor to welcome you to the first in our series of Brown Fashion Week talks, which are being broadcast live from the campus of Brown University here in historic Providence, Rhode Island. I'm Sasha Pinto, the president of Fashion at Brown, and tonight we are in for a very special treat. Our guest is, of course, Sarah Jessica Parker, who you're probably thinking needs no introduction at all, but let me fill you in anyhow, because Sarah Jessica is one amazing Renaissance woman. She's an entrepreneur who's founded and runs several successful businesses simultaneously, which we'll be talking about tonight. She's an activist who's harnessed her influence to call attention to important social issues and make the world a safer place. She's a humanitarian who's been a UNICEF spokesperson for decades. She was elected by the Obama administration to be a member of the President's Committee on the Arts and Humanities, and she worked with the Turnaround Arts Initiative to help the nation's lowest performing schools. And if all that isn't enough, she's also worked with AMFAR to support AIDS research and education, raise funds for public schools and literacy initiatives, and currently serves as the vice chairman of the board of directors of the New York City Ballet. And oh my goodness, we haven't even touched on her acting career yet, which began on Broadway when she was just 11, and by 13, she landed the title role in the musical Annie. And since then, Sarah Jessica has returned to the stage several times throughout her career in Tony Award nominated plays. And as soon as the lights come back to Broadway, she'll be on stage again with her hugely talented husband in a major revival of Neil Simon's comedy, Plaza Suite. And in between those Broadway stints, Sarah Jessica has starred in more great films than we have time to name tonight. In addition, of course, to revolutionizing television. She recently starred in the critically acclaimed HBO series Divorce, for which she was also the executive producer. And then, of course, there was that radical little show that forever changed the depiction of single women on the screen and created cultural icons of its stars, Sex and the City. So suffice it to say, if this were a live audience, I know you'd all be on your feet applauding by now. So won't you please join me in a virtual standing ovation to welcome our amazing guest, Sarah Jessica Parker. Hello, Sarah Jessica.
Hi, can you see me okay?
You are perfect. How are you doing?
Hi, Sasha. It's so nice to see you. Thank you so much for having me.
Well, thank you so much for joining us. And let me just start by saying how incredibly generous it is of you to be here at Brown Fashion Week. We really appreciate it.
Oh, it's my pleasure. I feel like it's a long time coming. I think we started talking about this well over a year ago. I couldn't join you last year. I was very flattered to be asked, and I'm very happy that this evening worked out. So thank you so much for having me.
Well, we are so happy to have you here. And tell me, are you in the city right now? You're a diehard New Yorker, aren't you?
Yes, I am. I'm in the city. Another chilly day, but we had some blue skies. So perhaps that portends better weather to come. Yeah.
Yes. And I know you certainly hung tough in the city for the last year, helping to jumpstart its recovery. Is the city coming back to life again?
I think we see glimmers, promising glimmers. Obviously, I think access to the vaccination has been really helpful just in terms of people's general feelings about safety. Yeah. I think the more we feel a sort of health security, the more businesses will have the opportunity to reopen. Right. But it's been a very challenging time. It's been a deeply, profoundly sad time. But there is imagery that feels as if we are on the road to a more familiar city. Right. I will say that there are communities that have done such a good job of supporting their local and small businesses. They've really rallied around and protected their own. Yeah. They've been really industrious and smart. and wonderful to one another. And so there are places in the boroughs all over that have done a really good job of taking care of their communities. And it's been a great lesson for all of us about sort of staying local and supporting our local businesses.
Right. And I just read today that live performances will be allowed in the city again. Isn't that great?
Yeah, that was really exciting news. It's going to be, the smaller venues. I think it's 33% capacity for 100, I think 100 or something, 150 people. And it grows obviously in capacity relative to the size of the venue. But just that first step is so exciting, obviously, for the cultural distraction that we've all been missing, but not to overlook that it means jobs are coming back to the city, jobs in the arts community, which have been, profoundly hurt. So I just think all of that is really great news. And it means that we're getting closer to all of our cultural institutions, our art institutions, having the support and having audiences back, which is just great news because it's a huge part of what our city offers.
Yeah, well, that's such good news. And there's so much to talk about. And we'll circle back to the topic of New York City and talk about your wonderful shoe boutique in a moment. But first, let's take a walk back in time and discuss some of your business ventures you've launched over the years. And we won't even have time to touch on all of them, of course, but why don't you start by telling us about Pretty Matches, your production company, and why you decided to launch it?
Well, after spending so much time and having such a singular experience on Sex and the City, HBO had been my home for 10 plus years. And when the show ended, it just felt peculiar to walk away from really what had become such an important and professional home for me. And they were very hospitable to the idea of a company within the company. And I was really excited about trying to produce more television that I felt HBO was uniquely equipped to do. It's hard to remember what HBO was when Sex and the City and Sopranos started, but it was a very different network. It was kind of a male-dominated network. It was pretty much about sports events, and there was some scripted shows. So I really wanted to stay there because I loved the way we got to make television there. It was very special and very unlike other places that I understood. And I had grown over this period of time to love television. I grew up without a television. I didn't have one for most of my childhood.
Me too.
So it was, a medium that I really didn't understand. I worked in it as a young adult and as a young person, obviously on Square Pegs, but I really grew to love the medium. I loved the pace of it. I loved its limitations. I also loved what it could do that cinema couldn't do, keep telling someone's story, let a light unfold. And I also had the opportunity to work with an amazing woman, Allison Benson, who came in, and we've been in partnership for 16 years now, and she's extraordinary and smart and inspired and tireless and so good about story, and has brought in so many amazing female writers and female directors. So it's been a wonderful experience.
Yeah, that's a really wonderful objective of your production company. And what's also wonderful are all the literary initiatives you've been involved with, which are so remarkable. You were the chair of the American Library Association's book club for a few years, and now you're in company and production with the British publishing house Hogarth, which I can't resist mentioning was originally founded by Virginia Woolf and her husband, which is such a cool detail. So tell us why literary projects are so important to you.
Well, probably in large part because I grew up without a television. My mother, I'm one of 8 children. My mother is still a voracious reader. Books were just a huge part of our growing up life. My mother had a rule in our home that you could not leave the house without something to read, without a book in your hands. And that meant even for those of us who were too young to even know yet how to read, she said it didn't matter. You can take a book and sit at it and make a story up from the images you see and from great illustrations. And so books were, these sort of companions that in some ways were forced upon us, right? For a while, you do what you're told, you're a child. But eventually what happened was, obviously I learned to read, but like all of my siblings, books became our choice. It's how we wanted to leave the home. It's the companions we wanted. And so I grew to be as greedy and voracious a reader as my mother was. And I just loved where books took me. I loved that I could be in a place far away that I might never have an opportunity to visit, be among people whom I might never know, hear language that I might never hear, be part of communities and cultures that were wonderfully foreign. And so when the opportunity presented itself to work in publishing, which was terrifying, and I definitely felt that I was not deserving, after I was convinced, the one thing I really wanted to do was to work in literary fiction, because that is my particular affection in publishing, because often those books are about people that are unfamiliar to us. They aren't as commercial or thought of as commercial,
Right.
but they're stories that are need to be told, and they're often by writers who haven't yet had the opportunity to share their stories and
Right.
for us to hear their voices. So I was excited to be able to work in publishing and bring those authors to hopefully to a larger audience.
Yeah. And didn't your first book zoom to the top of the New York Times bestseller list?
Well, the author's book did. I was only the lucky and fortunate publisher. Yeah, it was called A Place for Us by Fatima Farine Mirza, who is an extraordinary young woman. This was her first book out of the Iowa Writers Workshop. She'd taken, I think, 10 years or 8, 9, 10 years to write it. And when I received the manuscript, I was gobsmacked. It is an amazing story. And readers felt the way I did. It's a story of a Muslim American family and all its plurality, and about faith and choices and honoring a parent and an ideology, and also carving a place in the world for yourself. And it's an exquisite, heartbreaking, wonderful story. And it's had such success, but that is because this writer's voice needed to be heard. And though she is from, a family maybe not like yours or mine,
Right.
it is a story that is immediately, you connect to it, and her writing is so exquisite that you are pulled into this family's life. And I'm so excited about her future, and I feel so privileged that I got to publish this book, because I think it's a remarkable piece of literature.
Yeah, and it's so wonderful that your imprint can bring these voices to the rest of us. That's so important and really terrific. But I mean, okay, let's see. You're a producer, you're an editorial director, and not that school has driven me to drink or anything, but I happen to know you're also a terrific winemaker. So what prompted this new direction, Sarah Jessica?
Well, I feel like I'm repeating myself, but opportunities present themselves, and some feel ridiculous or foolish. And every now and then one comes, and though it's confounding, if you're curious about it, and if you're maybe have the opportunity to work with really smart, interesting partners who you think are not just very good at what they do, but are good and decent and honorable people, it's hard to say no. I'm a very curious person. I'm somebody who likes to learn new things and be part of new conversations. And I met the two gentlemen from this small wine business called 𝐁𝐿, which is out of New Zealand. And I was really impressed with them, and they convinced me that I could learn the business, and that they promised me they would share everything they knew, and I could ask as many questions and be involved to the degree that I like to, which is down to splitting the atom. And it's been a really wonderful, wonderful opportunity, but it's also been so nice to create something that people have responded to so well, but also that we get to have a philanthropic part of the business. So it's been surprising. It's been really fantastic. And now and then I get some free bottles of wine, which is also very nice.
And speaking of the philanthropic part of the business, I have to say, I especially love that your wine company is doing more than just making wine. You're also providing funding for a huge number of school children around the world who are facing a food crisis because of the pandemic. And you're partnering with Feed. That's so amazing. Can you tell us more about that?
Yeah, I think, this was an initiative that was really important to Tim and Rob. I think when you have any success, even if it's small in somebody else's eyes, and not just because, these particular times have been so challenging for so many people across the globe, it's awfully nice when you can be philanthropic, when you can think about other people and how you might have some impact, even if it's seemingly tiny. Feed has a nice long history now and has been doing great work. It reminds me a lot of the kind of work that UNICEF has been doing. And so we were very, very happy and very energized at the idea of working with Feed.
Yeah. And you really see a company's true colors during a crisis. So this initiative says a great deal about you and your partners. And on a related note, it strikes me that throughout your career, your business career, you've been pretty fearless about tackling a wide range of initiatives, learning new things, taking risks, and giving back wherever you can. And I think that leads to a larger conversation that you and I talked about the other day about how we as students should be looking at our world and considering our opportunities and our futures. So why don't you share your thoughts on that with everyone?
Well, I'm sort of intimidated to talk to Brown students about, the world that's in front of you. And I'm terrible at advice. I feel very nervous about offering any. I feel that you all are really lucky because you've been in an environment which I feel pretty confident saying has probably talked to you all a lot about the world that exists and the possibilities that exist for all of you. And I think the thing that's been most exciting to me as a young adult and now as a much older adult is just being curious and wanting, being pulled toward the unfamiliar. There is so much to be done in the world. There is so much, need. There is acute need. There's urgency. And there's all sorts of places in the world in which I think you guys are just going to have an enormous impact. I'm more inclined to share with you how excited I am about what you all are going to bring and offer and the perspective that we can't know and understand because of your youth and because of your generation's point of view, your recent experiences, politically, socially, economically. The way that you have transitioned into adulthood has been, I would say, probably shaped a lot by the political climate and the social climate, right, and an economic climate. So I feel that you all are really prepared. And I think there is a huge burden on your shoulders that we put on you. We look to you all to give us new solutions and problem solve in ways that we're not thinking about because you have different ways of seeing the world. And I would just encourage you all to continue to be individuals and to find paths that are uniquely your own. I think that's what's most exciting. That's always the most arresting people are the people that are themselves. I've said a lot and probably nothing, but I guess I think, being curious, being compassionate, being interested in other things and people that are different, and willing to work hard and not be a headliner right away has been, for me, the best. It's been the richest experience, actually, has been the hardest work and the stuff that's least, you don't feel the reward immediately, but it's a sort of accumulation. It's like building scar tissue or something.
Yeah. I don't know. I don't know what you meant when you said about not giving good advice. That was, oh my gosh, that was so inspiring and so important to hear. And perhaps you could tell us about some of the lessons you learned from projects that didn't work out for you. Perhaps something from your time as president and creative director at Halston, which must have been enormously interesting. Oh my goodness.
Yeah, that's a perfect example of, a situation where you're presented with an opportunity. It seems impossible to say no, even if once again you feel that you don't have the conventional experience that is typical to bringing into a company like that. I think what I learned is that some cultures cannot be changed. Part of that are generational differences, I think. And I think also there were old-fashioned ideas about men's and women's roles. And I sort of liken it to the boyfriend that everybody warns you about, who like comes with all sorts of warning signs, and you're like, no, 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 no. I can fix this. And that was sort of my perspective on Halston. Was everybody was like, that company's had a really impossible history. It's gone through all these problems and it's just been incredibly challenging for everybody. And I was like, no, 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 no. I love people. I love problems. I'll get in a foxhole with anybody. I'll work it out. I'll duke it out. I'll be tireless. And I was, and I did, but it couldn't be changed. It had no elasticity, really. It was really rigid and embedded in ideas. But I will say, what I learned is I didn't give up. I walked away. I'm a bitter ender. I walked away only when I knew that there was an obstacle that was just immovable. But I learned that you don't give up, and you stand by employees, and you listen to them, and you keep fighting for them, and you keep listening to them. And then there's just all sorts of business things that I learned in that company that I was able to take elsewhere. But I think it's the human interaction that always is the most important part of any, even disappointment or failure, is what relationships did I make? What did I learn? How did I take care of people when I had the opportunity to do so?
Yeah. I love that can-do attitude. And there's definitely a lesson in that for everyone listening. And putting all of these pieces together, let's talk about how you ended up creating your amazing SJP shoe collection, since I know everyone would be so interested in hearing all about it. And first, let me just say that the shoes are, oh my goodness, so pretty. The bows, the straps, the sparkles, they're really, really magical. But I read that you'd been asked to go into this shoe business many times before, and you always said no. So tell us, what was the impetus for finally jumping in and launching the SJP collection?
Well, when the television series ended, a bunch of people had asked about working in the shoe category, and it was intriguing, and I understood why. It made perfect sense. But every time I looked at the business model, it was shoes that were going to be very, very affordable, that was the best part of it, but they were going to be poorly made. They wouldn't last long. And on principle, I just didn't feel good about the exchange. I felt honor bound to be part of something that was well made, to try to get at a price point, given the quality, that made sense, that was reasonable, that even maybe changed the way we looked at those kinds of pricings and those kinds of margins. But also, I wanted to make shoes that I wanted to wear, that I knew would last. If somebody gave me their hard-earned dollars, they could go back to their closet in 5 years. The shoe would still be relevant. It would still fit. It would still feel good. It would be in good shape. And I just couldn't find that kind of partnership So one day I was having lunch with two women who I really admired, and they were asking me about it. And I was just like, I can't do it. I can't do it. I just keep saying no. And they said, well, who do you want to work with? And I said, well, there's this man, and he has this long history, and I'm love him. I admire, who he has been in the business and how he has taken care of his employees, and the way he's built a business. And they said, have you asked him? And I was like, no, he's so busy. He's always, anyway, they convinced me I should call him. I called him up, and he said, be at my office tomorrow morning. And he wanted the same things, which was shoes that were handmade in Italy, changing those price points if we could, calling on those relationships that he had had for many years, so we could go to the factories in Italy where shoes have been made, generation after generation, and say, like, this is a new way of thinking about this. This shoe is beautiful. It's made with all the fabrics that are sourced here and materials, but we want to do it at this price, which changes all of it. We were able to do it. We were able to focus on a business that I really wanted to do color as a neutral. I wanted to commit to the single sole. I didn't want to be a brand that was about whimsy and trend. I wanted a customer to know we would always have that shoe that she wanted. We wouldn't take it away from him or her. By the way, I will say we have men in the shop too. And it's been an amazing experience. It's been fantastic. It's been really hard work. It's been enormously gratifying. We have an amazing, small but mighty team, primarily women. And the best part, once again, is just being on the floor with a customer. It's the exchange with the customer, even in these times, that that I think really sustains all of us. When the governor reopened and we could open phase 2, July 7th, to just be back in the shop, and even though it's quieter than we would like, just to have a customer walk in and have that exchange, and even if they don't buy anything, just being with people again. And plus, they're a huge part of our design process. So having those conversations is important as well.
Yeah, and what I find really amazing is that you're one of the few corporate leaders who routinely works on the sales floor of your own retail outlets. You're actually waiting on customers, which is especially inspiring given your other endeavors and commitments. So what do you think is important in a business leader today? And how would you say your leadership style has evolved during COVID?
I'll try to answer those in order. I think that I think it's really important to be in the store as much as possible. I can do it now. I do it 2 days, 3 days a week, if not more, whenever I can. Especially because I'm about to go back to work as an actor for about a year. And so that means I won't have the same kind of time in the store that I love to have. I think retail has changed. This is not revolutionary for me to say this, but I think it's getting smaller. And I think people are, consumers are informed. They care a huge amount about what they're purchasing. And I think designers, when they can, whether they're owners of the business or not, should be in the store. When they can, it's just a huge difference, the connection with the customer, to really understand what he or she needs and what they want, to hear what they're excited about, to hear about their lives, to hear about someone who lives in Minneapolis, to hear about someone who lives in Southern California, to hear about a teacher in Illinois, and everybody in between. I think retail, it's been obviously really hurt by the pandemic. I think what it's going to take to survive is to have a connection, to get small again, frankly. We were able to get small because we're small. And I think there's an advantage to that. I think the pandemic has changed me as a leader, because we've had to look at our dollars and say to ourselves every single day, how do we keep our employees? What does it take for us to sustain this business, to sustain our employees, to take care of their health insurance, but to also grow a business at the same time? Where do we redirect our efforts? How do we meet our customer where they are? If that means that I'm dropping off shoes on the way downtown, then that's what I'm doing. If that means being in the store on days when the numbers have risen in New York and people are scared again, then I say I'm in the store. I will call, I will walk you through. We will have a virtual experience. We have just really hunkered down. We've kept our doors open. We've gotten far more creative, and I just think that's what it's going to take. But I will say it's not that effortful, because we love our business. We love our customers. We don't want to disappoint them. And I want to keep this business alive because I love it.
Yeah. Well, this must be a really difficult time to be running retail, and you mentioned hand delivering shoes in your neighborhood as you're walking home from work every day. That is astonishing. I mean, what are people's reactions when Sarah Jessica Parker knocks on their door with their delivery?
Well, I tell them in advance because I have to get their address, so they're not that surprised. If I could make them uptown, downtown, east and west, I would do that, but we sort of split it up. We sort of divide and conquer. If someone lives in Brooklyn, they end up taking them to Brooklyn. I think that that's the way we've run our business from the beginning. I mean, we have handled all of our customer service like as if there are, two of us. And, we've always sort of treated the business as if it's, a conversation between two people. So the difference now is that we have to get to our customer. Not everybody can get to New York. I think 3% of the people that follow us on Instagram, on our social media page for the shoes, are are New Yorkers. That means everybody else is elsewhere. So how are we connecting with them? They still want to buy our shoes, which is a thrill. We feel very privileged by their patronage, but we have to find ways to meet them. So when I take a shoe downtown, or two or three, and make drops on the way, they know I'm coming. They're all very nice. We socially distance. We all have our masks on.
Wow.
And it's really, I can't tell you how much, I don't know how much they enjoy it, but I can tell you it's a highlight of my day. I mean, I love it. That's why I love being on the floor, because I meet people from literally all over the world. I learn about people's lives, their children. I learn about their illnesses, their family losses. I mean, you know, it's a really nice relationship. And for years being an actor, you don't get to have those conversations. And
Yeah.
now I do, and it's really nice.
That is really beautiful. Wow. And you touched on why you have your shoes made in Italy earlier, but let's talk a little bit about sustainability and responsibility in your shoe collection, because I know you're very aware of price points versus the true cost of things. And I've read that the documentary, The True Cost, actually made a big impact on you. So I guess this is a two-part question. How have sustainability issues impacted your manufacturing decisions? And what about in your personal shopping habits as well?
Well, like you said, you know, we really wanted to make shoes in Italy, in large part because of just the quality of the shoe. And they do have such a long and storied history of being, some might argue, the best shoemakers in the world. But we also knew that what typically comes out of those factories starts at 3 and 4 times higher than where we wanted to be. So it was a whole new business model. But it was really important to me that I try to get that shoe and make it be more accessible. Our goal obviously is to grow. And when you grow and your orders are bigger, your margins change, you can lower price. So as we grow, we get to like be a bigger company. So it was important for me to at least start there. So that was something that we've been able to do, and we keep our eye on that all the time. And then, yeah, the true cost was really, I can't remember, somebody, it sort of was passed to me like a friend to a friend of a friend. And I got this CD. I mean, it was a DVD. It was like someone had written on it with a Sharpie, you know, The True Cost. And for some reason, all of us as a family sat down to watch it. And it was, you know, I had worked a lot on social compliance actually at Halston. That was a huge part of that job. And then when I ran Bitten for a while, social compliance was a huge part of what I did all the time, which was what factories are we working in? You know, what are their you know, how are they, what are their guidelines for safety? How are they treating workers? So when I saw the true cost, I was familiar with a lot of the language, but I had not seen the extent of the kind of exploitation that was happening. And it was stunning. I don't know if any of the people that are joining us tonight have seen it, but if not, it's a really interesting and a very informative documentary about fast fashion and the manufacture of goods, and also how much we toss, you know, how much we throw clothes away. And so I made a decision after that movie that I would really try to buy used clothes as much as possible. I'm a mother of 3 children, and kids grow out of clothes all the time. There's, you know, I'm one of 8 kids, and there's 13 grandchildren. So hand-me-downs pass through our house all the time. We send bins out. But I thought, you know, I can buy my kids used clothes. I've always been a fan of thrift stores anyway, and vintage shops. So I just really wanted to be thoughtful about the way I was a consumer in the world, and how I could, you know, not contribute to the things that aren't contributing to humanity and healthy lives, and giving young women, you know, the opportunities to make a living wage and to educate themselves and work in safe environments. And so the true cost is a great gateway to better understanding that business and how much better it can do.
Yeah, I think it's impossible not to be moved after seeing The True Cost, because it's such a wake-up call. So for anyone out there who hasn't seen it, please go and watch it. It's so astonishing. And so, Jessica, you mentioned thrift stores, and you can get such fantastic scores there. Didn't the famous white tutu in the Sex and the City opening credits come from a thrift store as well?
You know what? I think it didn't. I might be wrong, and there's maybe somebody who's watching tonight who remembers its provenance. I think Pat found it and then had a double made. I'm not sure. You mean in the opening, you mean the title sequence, right?
Yeah, exactly.
I feel like I'm not gonna, I don't want to say this with certainty. I think it wasn't a thrift store piece. Basically everything else Carrie wore was. The tutu in Paris was a thrift store piece. But I think Pat found it. I don't know. I'm glad I can't remember. I'm so sorry, Sasha.
Oh,
I can't remember. I know
that's,
there were two because I know Michael Patrick King had one in his office. He framed the other one. He has one of them.
well, that's amazing
I
that
have the
so
other
many
one.
that so many of Carrie's outfits were born in thrift stores. That's really remarkable.
Yeah.
And kind of doing a 180 now,
Okay.
let's talk about the creative process of designing shoes. I mean, how do you come up with ideas for your collection? Do you think about the actual customers you meet in your shop or when you drop off shoes? Do you think about trends? How do you go about it all?
Well, George and I do it together, and our team is a huge part of it. We always ask, their thoughts, their feelings. When our samples come in from Italy, everybody gets to be part of it. Everybody gets to say how they feel about a shoe, about materials, about a new ornament. I think what we do is we never look at trends. It doesn't even enter into the conversation. I think first of all, what we do is we try to design into success. So what I mean by that is, what do we see our customers coming back for over and over and over again? And how do we protect that? So what we've created is something called evergreen. So there's a bunch of shoes that are evergreen that will always be there. For instance, cosmetic companies, you love a red lipstick and then they take it away and you're like, why would they? And there's a theory about that, right? Because then you'll buy a new lipstick. We believe in sort of doubling down on what we see our customers love so that they can always come back to us for a beautiful pump, the fawn, for instance, or the rambling. So part of it is just listening to the customer. The next part of it is, what does she need? And then what does she want? And part of what she wants, we learn just through our engagement in social media, just checking in with them, doing videos, asking them to share with us, like, what are the things that they're excited about? We share materials now with them. We talk about ideas we have. But then we just, George and I have always been excited about the past. So we dig into the past. We share a lot of points of reference. But also there's a new time, right? People are at home a lot now. That will obviously change, but how much that will change, we don't know. So we've thought a lot about, what do we give our customer to have in her home? How do you still have a party for your foot when
I
you're
love
not
that.
leaving your home? I think more and more people are going to entertain in their home, safe numbers. They're going to we've seen people wanting to dress up still, and that the period at the end of the sentence is the shoe. So we think a lot about, how do we accommodate that? What is an indoor shoe? What does that look like? What does it mean? And just shoes that we've loved, that the ideas that we've loved and have not done yet. And sometimes, like, a shoe will birth another shoe. We had a shoe called Tarte. We couldn't get any of our retail partners to pick it up for market. We stuck by it. We finally did it ourselves. It sold out in 20 minutes. Well, Tarte, named for Donna Tarte. Tarte has birthed Cosette, it's birthed Celine, and those shoes have all been really, really good for us. So we also try to, and the one last thing I'll say, because it's a long answer to a short question, is we really try to make sure not everybody wears heels. Not everybody wears 100 millimeter, 90 millimeter. So we really try to have flats, sneakers, block heels, all different heights, because people want a beautiful shoe, but not everybody wears a high heel, but they don't want just a sensible shoe if they don't wear high heels. So all of that's part of the conversation.
Wow, that's so interesting. And you kind of touched on this, but are you considering some new designs to accommodate the shift to more at-home entertaining because of the pandemic?
We are, and we have, and actually we've done something which we've not typically done, which is usually there's about 4 or 5 deliveries a year. That's very typical. You have, pre-fall, fall, spring, summer resort. But we've added something that we're calling the spring basket. And it really does address people being at home more. Also, we're getting a lot of brides. So we have what we're calling the spring baskets. We're delivering in about 2 weeks. And that has some indoor shoes, but they're beautiful. But they're shoes that seem more suitable for being inside, but they still accomplish the sort of delight and, that shoes can bring some people, maybe not everybody.
So, I mean, right now the SJP collection includes shoes, accessories, fragrances, books, wine, a little black dress. It feels like the SJP lifestyle collection. So what's next in your lineup? Do you anticipate growing the collection to include other items, or has the pandemic changed those plans?
You have to grow. You have to find new initiatives. You just simply do. It's just the way the world works now. So we're always creating new silhouette styles. We have a backpack that's been really successful for us that we love, that I carry every day. So we've been able to roll out really great colors. So we have new colors coming for that. We're about to have an amazing new color. We're about to make a really exciting announcement about that collection growing. And that's been great. And that's been a partnership that we've had with Samsonite. Our backpack Carried Away was picked as one of Oprah's favorites. So that was a big deal for us. So that backpack Carried Away has been amazing. So that collection is going to grow. The shoe collection will always grow. And then just the other sort of accessory business will always grow, because you really want to have something for everybody that comes into the store. And we always say to people, come in, you can try shoes on because it makes us happy. You don't have to leave here with a parcel in your hand, but a lot of people like to leave with something. So we try to have something at every price point just so that they can leave with something. And you always have to think about those items and what they are and what's worth someone's dollars, and you don't want to just add junk to someone's home, so all of that continues to grow all the time.
Yeah, that's so interesting, and I'm so excited to see the new additions to your collection. That's super exciting. And well, there's one thing we haven't really discussed yet, and we can't go through the evening without talking about Carrie Bradshaw, of course, because I'm sure everyone listening would agree that Sex and the City was the most fashionable show in television history, and that you, as Carrie, single-handedly changed the way women dress. So tell us about the process of creating Carrie's iconic outfits, because I know you worked closely with the show's costume designer, the amazing Pat Fields.
Yeah. Yes, Patricia Fields is a wonder. Her entire team is a wonder. And it's a huge part of the storytelling. It's a huge part of Sex and the City or any other job, I've had as an actor. You can rehearse and rehearse and rehearse, but it's the fitting where everything comes together. It's just plays such an integral part of figuring out who you are. And sometimes the fashion it has a louder voice. And I think Sex and the City is an example of that. But pardon me, sorry, having Patricia Fields, having Molly Rogers, who was her right hand and someone she worked really closely with, and everybody that they hired, part of creating that image was huge. And a lot of those team members will be back with us, which is really exciting. But it's also it's some of the happiest memories I have are those fittings, because I was shooting that show every single day. I worked, 18, 20-hour days for years before I had kids, and even after I had kids. So you'd fit fittings in whenever you could, and it would often mean at wrap. So at 12, 1, 2 in the morning, I would then go into fitting. And those fittings could be 3 to 5 hours, because you'd be doing 2 episodes back to back. And at a certain point in that series life, I was wearing 20, 30 costumes, per 2 episodes. But they were so much fun. And I did whatever I was told. I would try on anything, no matter how ridiculous. I mean, we'd be doubled over laughing sometime, because so much of the stuff was from thrift stores and vintage shops and pulled from the most peculiar and outrageous spots. And I just did it because I admired that team of people so much. And we would get to the set sometime and Michael Patrick would be like, "What are you wearing?" And I would be like, "Just trust me on this." He was like, "The bird, in the veil." He was like, "Why do you have to have a bird in your head?" And I was just like, "Just listen, trust me on this." Or a perfect example is the dress in Paris. We had no reason to put that dress on. We could not rationalize it. We couldn't plead our case in the court. Like we had no defense, but we were just like, because it's beautiful and because the audience will love it. And so sometimes you make decisions for real storytelling and sometimes you just do it because it brings joy.
Yeah, and that's amazing. 𝐀𝐁𝐎 never looks so tired after all those night fittings.
I know.
How did 𝐀𝐻𝐿's style change over the years and in the seasons to reflect any changes in her character?
I don't know that it really changed that much over the years. I mean, sometimes I feel like people are better able to talk about that than I am. I've only ever seen every episode one time. So I've not watched it as much as some other people. I mean, I think, well, one thing that changed was we just had access. In the beginning, we had a very tiny budget. Nobody would loan us anything. I mean, nothing. We couldn't get a bag. We couldn't get a flip-flop. So we were working within our financial means, and it was just, ingenuity and industriousness that, and thrift stores all over New York City. I mean, so I think what changed was just access to other items. Contemporary fashion opened its doors to us, and that just changed everything. And it was helpful because 𝐀𝐻𝐿 was so feverish about fashion and shoes, and we could show it by getting our hands on stuff that we couldn't afford. But borrowing something just, and once one person loans you something, then the floodgates open.
Well, that's so interesting. It sounds like such a fun and terrific collaboration with Pat Fields. And we'll be returning to the subject of Sex and the City when we turn it over to our audience questions. And keeping an eye on the time, shall we do that now? Okay. So we received so many questions, Sarah Jessica. It was so hard to choose. But our first audience questions comes from Sandra Ortiz Juarez from Grand Island, New York, who writes that the world has changed tremendously since the first episode of Sex and the City. So how do you think Carrie Bradshaw would adapt to the new era where the fashion industry is so competitive thanks to influencers and social media?
Well, Sandra, it's funny you should ask that because I think that is a question that Michael and the writers' room are puzzling over right now as they're writing this new season of the next chapter. I'm not sure. I mean, I could give a kind of flip answer and say, I'm sure a lot of it she would find, she would object to. But I think there's a part of her that would love to see other people enjoy fashion as much as she does and appreciate it as much as she does. But I'm very curious to see how, not to deflect because I don't really have an answer, but I'm very curious to see how Michael Patrick and the writing room tackle that because we have to talk about it.
Yeah, and speaking of reprising Carrie Bradshaw, I think everyone is dying to know more about And Just Like That and what 𝐀𝐻𝐿 has been up to for the past 17 years. So can you give us any inside scoop, Sarah Jessica?
Well, Sasha, I'm not trying to be coy. I'm really not, but I don't know anything yet. Nothing that I can share that's meaningful. And it's, one of the many things that I'm excited about is hearing all that and learning it and playing it and being back, with Cynthia and Kristen and on the streets of New York. And what often happens too in the course of a season is you can start with an intention. John Corbett was meant to do a couple of episodes, but an actor comes along and, he's so magnetic and charismatic and people have such strong feelings about him, and you shift very quickly and accommodate all of that. So I think it's very possible that we could head in with large ideas and arcs and a real plan, because Michael is a planner. but that he will, that it's very possible that a great actress will join us, and she will have a huge impact, and we'll want to be with her more. Audience will want to see her more. So I don't have anything to share yet.
Oh, you'll have to
I'm
keep us
very
in
excited.
suspense. Yeah, that is so exciting. Okay, back to audience questions. We received another question from Kevin Hughes Naboa, who's another New Yorker, who wants you to know that The Family Stone is one of his favorite holiday movies of all time. And he writes, quote, during the Christmas Eve dinner scene, your character engages in a rather controversial discussion regarding Diane Keaton's character, who wished for gay children. And as you're such a fierce advocate for the LGBTQ plus community, what was it like to play a character that was, shall we say, a bit ignorant to the issues of acceptance of LGBTQ plus people and their families?
Well, that was a beautiful script. Tom Bazooka was the writer and director of that movie. And it was a really interesting to play somebody whose point of view was so foreign to my own. But I was really interested in just trying to understand her, but more so just communicating that.
Yeah.
Because it was nice to have a conversation where somebody says something and there's a response and something comes of it. And that's a point of view, obviously, unfortunately, that is not unique. So it was, I think, it was interesting for me to play it. I mean, just as an actor, but also to have the conversation around it. And I think, God, that movie was forever ago. My son was 2, he's 18. Wow. So a lot of years ago. And we're still having conversations about the LGBTQ community, the plus community. So, it's interesting.
Yeah. I just watched that movie over winter holidays, and it was so painful to watch sometimes, but it must have been a real challenge to play Meredith.
It was. I remember being embarrassed in that at the dinner table. Like I had to remind, like I literally had to say to myself, like, Diane doesn't think I think this, right? Like, it's just so anathema to my life and my friendships and my community and the arts and everybody who's been so meaningful to me, being part of that community. So anyway, yeah. But she was, like many people, just wasn't informed, wasn't opened, didn't have people around her that were willing early on in her life to shape her worldview. And I think in a way that's far more humane and,
Yeah, that's so interesting. Okay, back to audience questions.
Yeah.
Here we have one from Lily Windholtz from San Francisco, who's at Colby College in Maine, who wants to know if you feel a responsibility in the age of social media to engage in political discourse, especially as someone with such a large platform.
What was her name? Did I say her name?
Lily Windholtz.
Lily at Colby.
Yes.
I grew up in a family that was politically involved. Before we were born, my parents were very involved politically in small ways, in their local, municipal elections, statewide, but just also related to issues of the time. And so I grew up in a house, we grew up protesting. We grew up, I think the first time my picture was in the paper was we were protesting the Vietnam War on the campus of Ohio University.
Wow.
We walked around with sandwich boards on that said war is not healthy for children and other living things. So I grew up in a house that it was expected that you would be involved, that you would be civic minded, that you would be part of your community, that you would engage and you would put effort into the things that were important to you. That public service, in a way, should be part of your life. You get up in the morning, you brush your teeth, and you think about the world around you. And so being an actor sort of was unrelated to the way I thought the way I wanted to function in the world. The fact that I paid attention, to what was happening politically, socially, but obviously, you have the opportunity to speak sometimes for people whose voices are not being heard. That's really important to me. Yeah. But I think it's also important to be informed, to not not hurt a cause by not being educated about what you're talking about. But I think more and more so, an actor's voice is no more important than a community leader. I mean, I think we've seen over the past year the kind of voices that have risen, that have led the hardest conversations, have been voices of a lot of young people that we did not know who they were. And they've come from all over this country, and they've been brave, they've been committed, they've been tireless, and they're not actors. But as an actor, I'm just doing what I would do if I was a teacher, but I understand that I'm given an opportunity sometimes to bring attention or shine a light on something, and I take that seriously. It's really meaningful to me. I'm not glib about it, but I would do it no matter what my vocation.
Yeah, that's so important. And I personally loved all your Instagram posts around the election. They were very great. And this is probably our last audience question, and it comes from Eric Stephen Jacobs from New York City, who says, "You wear so many hats: wife, mother, acclaimed actress, pop culture personality, New Yorker, and of course, widely recognized fashion icon. How did all this come to be from the little girl growing up in Nelsonville, Ohio?"
I don't know. I don't know. I think it's Eric, right, from New York City. If I had to lay the the blame at the foot of anything, it would just be curiosity. I think I've always been curious. I've always listened to everybody else's conversation. I've always stared on the subway at everybody. I've always said, "What are you guys talking about?" I was always that person. And my dad used to say to me on the subway, "You're staring at everybody. You have to stop staring. You're making a spectacle of yourself." And I was like, "I can't help it. I'm interested." Or my brothers, and I would always ask everybody, "What are you guys talking about? What are you talking about?" So I think, curiosity has been a gateway for me, and I hope for all of you and all of your classmates who are about to take on the world. So much can be gained and from being excited and curious and interested and unfamiliar. Like, it's okay to feel unfamiliar. I think it's just I think it's literally it's the card, it's the key. And so I would have to say it's curiosity that's allowed me to have such surprising experiences professionally and therefore personally.
Yeah, that's really beautiful. And I think curiosity is a hallmark of Brown students too. And I imagine there's quite a story behind your life. Maybe you should add author to your list of accomplishments, Sarah Jessica, and write an autobiography one day.
Oh no, I don't have a college education. I'm not even sure what is it, a dangling participle is. So I don't know that I'm able to write a book.
Well, Sarah Jessica, we're almost out of time, and this has been so wonderful. But before we go, I'd love to ask you one last question, because I've listened to your address to the Harvard Law School graduating class during their class day ceremony a few years ago. And your talk was filled with such incredible grace and humor and wisdom as you outlined your 9 inspirational hopes for them. So with so many of us graduating this spring and entering the world in the middle of a remarkably challenging moment in time, do you have any inspirational hopes that you'd like to leave us with here tonight?
Oh, well, first of all, I'm so bad at this. I've said a lot about curiosity, so I will say hang your hat on that for sure. But I would also want you to know how excited we are about you all. Like, I really mean that. And perhaps it's because I'm a mother. I have an 18-year-old son, and I witness the way he is in the world. And I would just say, throw yourself at it. And yes, it is an unthinkably hard time to enter the workforce or consider young adulthood. Don't expect it to be easy. Easy isn't actually always what we want. Be willing to work hard and see the reward in it, and let yourself don't listen to what you should be doing. Don't listen to like some blueprint that's been around since the turn of the century or even 1920. Create your own, because those are the people, right, that we're like most drawn to, are the people that set out on their own path, took care of each other, right, along the way, filled with compassion, but we're their own people. And that's what I would hope for all of you, that you continue to be your own people, and that you do so with, grace and humility, but a lot of excitement, and know that we are waiting for you. We are ready for you, and we're ready for your ideas and all that you're going to contribute. And I know Brown has prepared you beautifully.
Well, that is truly a beautiful message. Thank you, Sarah Jessica. And I think we should let that be the last word. So I'd like to thank our audience for joining us, and hope we'll see you at some of our upcoming 16 Brown Fashion Week events in the next 2 weeks. But most of all, thank you, Sarah Jessica. Your presence has meant so much to all of us listening here tonight, but especially to all of us at Brown University and Fashion at Brown.
Thank you. Thank you, Sasha. And thank you to everyone who joined tonight. And I wish you all my best, and be safe and be well. And till next time.
Yes. So have a lovely evening, everyone. And goodbye from Providence.
Bye.